Hey there, this is the TBH with Toby B. Hemingway. That's me. Monthly digest podcast for December 2024. It's the new year now, so happy new year. Can you hear it? Can you hear the holiday cold in my voice? Yep. I was the last member of the family to get it, but I got it. So apologies if the sound is a little grating. This month, well, in December, I rounded out the year. Oh man, it's always hard to crank work out at the end of the year, but I did it. I got 3 stories in. I can't remember why it wasn't 4. Oh, Christmas. That's why. Yeah. I basically, I didn't do something Christmas week. Partly because the third of these stories is about how I didn't do a year-end list. Year-end lists, I don't know if it's because of Spotify Wrapped. That's probably got a lot to do with it. That popular thing where Spotify tells you everything you listen to over the year and packages it up and makes it a sort of social media shareable image. Has kind of democratized the world of lists. I feel like lists used to be just in publications, and now everybody's got a list, or maybe everyone's got a publication. Look at me here, spruiking my publication. Anyway, so I maybe in opposition to that, I didn't do any sort of year-end list. Maybe I come across as being a bit negative about them. I think I was just having a bad month with lists, honestly. I think the Spotify thing had maybe reached its natural end. Everyone was sending me lists. I was just a bit over it. I still read them sometimes, flick through them anyway. I also had one of those years where the music lists, which is probably the most common one I see, is like albums of the year, songs of the year, that sort of thing, just seemed more and more foreign to me, made me feel more and more old, which is okay. It's all good. It just didn't seem particularly relevant. Anyway, one of the albums that was on a few lists was Nick Cave's new album. I listened to it, tried to listen to it a few times. Got me thinking about AI, funnily enough, given that Nick has been quite vocal and articulate about his feelings regarding AI. His album sounded a bit like an AI Nick Cave to me. But anyway, you can read about that or hear about it in the last story here. The other thing I wrote about back at the beginning of December was this poem by Charles Bukowski called The Railroad Yard, which I think about all the time, but particularly how we attach feeling to objects. And if you're a certain type of person like me, often it's sort of old objects or forgotten objects or ordinary objects. In this case, one that comes to me a lot is when I see apartments and shop fronts for rent. I get this feeling, which I try to explain in that story called My Railroad Yard, about for rent signs. You see a lot of for rent signs in a city like Los Angeles, and I always think, ooh, that looks like a good one, and start to picture what that place might be like and what the rent might be like and what kind of life I got to have there, which is ridiculous. But that's just where my mind goes. Anyway, I wrote about that, and that feeling, it's interesting how some things, as you get older, the feelings change and things you used to think about go away and new things creep in. That one's pretty consistent with me, which fascinates me. It's just when I go past a place with a for rent sign, if it looks like a decent place, I get really intrigued about what it might be like and how the landlord is and is the rent fair. Anyway, don't know why, but that one is sticking with me. The other thing I wrote about was just kind of a wrap up of some of the trips I've done this year or last year now, and the things that I've been lucky enough to write about, sometimes for publication, sometimes not. I mentioned a trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I wrote about that for one publication, and another piece will actually be published this year, in the middle of the year. It's going to be a while. Don't ask me why. In an Australian publication. So I'll let you know about that when it happens. It'll be a while, but I'm happy about that because I put a lot of work into that piece. Was hoping it would get picked up, and it did, even though I've got to shorten it now, which I'm not excited about. Anyway, traveling was good this year. Last year. I keep saying this year because, hey, it's January 6th when I'm recording this. So give me a couple of weeks. I'm gonna write 2024 on things, checks, whatnot. I know. We're all gonna do it. But anyway, last year, a lot of travel, which our kids are young. They're 7 and 10. So we've gone through the most intense sort of, certainly hour by hour parenting. I know things get more intense sort of as the feelings get more intense and the kids get older, but when they're little, you got to be there all the time so they don't kill themselves, literally. And so 2024 was kind of the first year where I felt like I could actually leave for a few days at a time and everyone would be okay. Not that my wife can't handle things, but she's very busy. So it was the first year where since I think our son was born, where I was able to say, you know what, I want to go do this thing, just me. And I got to do it, which is great. Very grateful for that. As I allude to briefly in the story, it was a tough year for me mentally in a lot of ways. I'm not going to get into that because a bit like end of year lists, I find people talking about their mental health can be really self-indulgent and boring. But the traveling helped. It took me back to a version of myself that I think I experienced more fully when I was touring as a musician and just when I was younger and freer of a lot of obligations, family obligations. And that was nice. I really do like landing in a place I've never been and renting a car and driving. It's simple, and I'll take it any day over luxury resorts or weeks on the beach or whatever. I really will. I just like going somewhere I've not been before and having the freedom of having an automobile. And I tell you, with sat-nav these days, that's short for satellite navigation. Sorry about that. Man, you can just go anywhere, and then you can search a place to eat. You can get on the internet and find the best this, the best that, and then you get somewhere and then you just ask some people about something else you're looking for. Then you just plug it into your phone and bang, you're there. It's incredible. I got, as much as my phone annoys the hell out of me, I was thinking about this recently. That's the big plus for me. This Google Maps satellite navigation thing, you can just go wherever you want. It's incredible. And then the other thing that's fun, I was talking to someone else about this recently. When you rent a car in some state that's not California, and it's like a Nissan Sentra with a tank the size of a bowl of cereal, and gas is $2.50 instead of $4.50 what we pay out here. You go fill up the car and you're laughing. It's like $15 to fill the car up before you take it back to the rental place. Good times. Anyway, briefly ran down that in the story one more time with feeling. I hope to do more of that this year. I don't have much planned, but yeah, I'm going to get back on the road, and I look forward to when my kids are a little older, and I can just take one with me. That would be fun too. Where I don't have to worry about everything they've left in the airplane seat pocket and they don't tell me when they're hungry instead of just getting food, and I don't have to ask them if they brush their teeth and showered and stuff. Like, I'm looking forward to that, when they can just take care of business to a certain degree, and we can just get on. Anyway, the last trip of all was to Asheville, North Carolina. I talk about that briefly in the first piece of this month, so we'll cover that at the end of this month. But that was great. Another place I'd never been to. Beautiful landscape. Amazing to see everything after that flood from Hurricane Helene. And that, yeah, I spoke about that. I spoke about that a little bit in the last piece, the first piece of this month. But maybe I'll write more about that in another way later. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still recovering from everything. Look, guys, listen to me. I've got holiday cold. First day back at the desk. I got no idea what's going on. So I'll get back to you. I hope you enjoy these stories. It's not very long, this one. And I'll catch up with you at the end of this month. Thanks a lot for reading and listening and hanging around. And remember to subscribe to the Substack if you can, and this podcast, like all that stuff. It all helps. I appreciate it. Thanks. My Railroad Yard, from December 4th, 2024. The feelings I get driving past the railroad yard, never on purpose, but on my way to somewhere, are the feelings other men have for other things. From The Railroad Yard by Charles Bukowski. The first lines of this Charles Bukowski poem are what I think about whenever I drive past an apartment with a for rent sign. They are my railroad yard. I haven't rented an apartment in years, but I remember the hunt so well. These days I drive by, never on purpose, as Bukowski wrote, but on my way to somewhere, craning my neck for a better look at the place, as the flow of cars sweeps me away. The urge to get out and take a peek irrationally strong. Back in the day, when renting a place was my only best option, at the dawn of internet listings, driving around hoping to spot a sign was my preferred method of apartment hunting, particularly in Los Angeles. I would pick a neighborhood that suited me, later my wife also, and a weekday afternoon I had free, then just drive it. The neighborhoods of Los Angeles, the real ones, the old, central, eclectic, countless ones, are dotted with apartment buildings. Perfectly nice places, well maintained by decent landlords, stand cheek to jowl with total dumps. You have to choose carefully. Many were constructed, at some point in the past century, side by side for the length of whole narrow neighborhood streets before the implementation of sufficient parking requirements, meaning that after 5 p.m. the curbs are choked with the parked cars of way too many residents, some often sitting behind the wheel, out in the middle of the street at dusk, hazard lights on, just waiting for their neighbour to make a false move, to leave for a late shift or to pick up a child, so they can swoop. In the early afternoons, though, it is quieter. Apartment hunting, like parking, can be highly competitive in a large city. You have to grab any advantage. My thinking was that most people look for apartments on the weekends, not a Tuesday at noon. Sometimes timing was the greatest friend I had. First come, first served. So between sporadic work, when I had a weekday off, I too would pounce, hoping to catch a newly mounted for rent sign in a window or spiked into a lawn before anyone else had a chance. Before cell phones, I would scribble down the addresses, phone numbers, and the rents, if posted, which was always a gift, as I knew whether to bother or not, in a small notebook and roll through the calls once I got home. Typically the landlords themselves took the call, sizing you up by your telephone manner, quizzing me on the accent. With cell phones, it became dead easy. I could dial from right outside, in my car, and sometimes be let in for a viewing within minutes. Years later, the thrill of this hunt lingers, which is why the Bukowski poem always comes to me, still. The thoughts of pure possibility. To find a good apartment in a nice neighbourhood at an affordable rate can be life-changing. Apartments are like new cars. No one wants to feel like they've overpaid. Every month when you write that check, you are reminded of the choice you made, the deal you struck, not just with the landlord, but with yourself. You want giving up all that money to someone with more homes than they need to feel as painless as possible. Driving by now, I remember the good deals I struck, and the okay ones, and I wonder if I've still got it, the eye. That looks like a good one, I'll think to myself. Definitely would have called. I wonder what the rent would be these days. The sunlight in that living room must be lovely about now. Right near that nice coffee shop too. Might even have a spare room. How's the parking though? Then I remember that I have a wife and 2 children, and that we own a perfectly nice house, and I'm not going anywhere. But for a split second, maybe in only the time it takes for an amber traffic light to turn green, I picture a fresh start in a newly repainted apartment on a nice block with really good rent and everything in its right place. Like a smoker who gave up years ago, imagining the drag catching in his throat, then letting it go. One last time. One More Time With Feeling, from December 12th, 2024. This year I've been lucky enough to travel more than usual, particularly to places I'd not been before. It hasn't been the best year for me mentally, and hitting the road again has really helped. I highly recommend it. As a musician many years ago, touring was my favourite way to travel. I've never been great at beach holidays or hanging around in hotel rooms, so a new town every night, meeting locals, staying occupied in my work was ideal. But I love my wife and family too. I want to spend time with them. Like all young families, they're at home mostly, so it's always a balance. Last weekend we did all hit the road on a last-minute trip to Austin, Texas for a relative's funeral. After we checked into our hotel, everyone but me slowly settled in. The kids figured out they could call between rooms, so every 10 seconds a phone would ring, the old bell type that really rattles your brain, until they decided to grab their tablets and just watch stuff, while my wife lay down to read. I hung up my suit and couldn't sit down. It had been 15 years since I was last in Austin for the South by Southwest festival. I left the family be and wandered out onto South Congress to reacquaint myself. Across the road was an old pizza place with gingham tablecloths and low lighting. I sat at the bar, grabbed a slice and a local beer. Wasn't there for more than 20 minutes, but it was heaven. It was somewhere new. Back in October, I took my first trip to Oklahoma to visit the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa and look around a little. A piece I wrote about that museum, as well as the Woody Guthrie Center next door, was published this week on the 50 Grand magazine site. Check it out here. They're great museums. There's more to say about Oklahoma in general, much more. We'll see if a longer story I wrote makes it into print at a different publication. Otherwise, I'll drop it here sometime. In 2022, I unknowingly began somewhat of a series of music travel history stories for 50 Grand that began in Minneapolis. The other of the 3, so far, was from my trip to the legacy sites in Montgomery, Alabama in February this year. On my first real trip to the South, I was plunged viscerally into America's long history of slavery, segregation, incarceration, and civil rights struggles, which was to be expected. What I didn't expect was to stumble upon a trove of Hank Williams' history in Montgomery too. Connecting his musical legacy to the sweeping darkness of black subjugation at the heart of American history felt somehow inevitable, sadly. In case you haven't already, you can read that story here. Next week, I'll make my last trip of the year, most likely, to another new town and state for me, Asheville, North Carolina. A friend has arranged a group to volunteer with a charity supporting communities affected by Hurricane Helene. Asheville was hit hard by flooding, and I expect I'll be digging a lot of mud out of homes, or something glamorous like that. I'll catch some music too, of course, and report back. In the meantime, if you'd care to donate to support the recovery work in Asheville that I'll be part of via All Hands and Hearts, please do so here. I'm sure it'll be much appreciated. All the stories I just mentioned are linked to in the copy of this story, so go back and have a look if you'd like to. Also, I put in a link to the donation page for All Hands and Hearts, who I'll be working with in Asheville, North Carolina next week. I have decided to spare you my year-end list from December 18th, 2024. I've decided to spare you my year-end list. Not that I have one to begin with. I've done this sort of thing in the past, but these days they feel more and more like self-aggrandizing, competitive, slightly culture-shaming branding exercises, particularly the music ones. Still, I get sucked into reading them. On a couple this year, I spotted Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds' latest album, Wild God. I've loved Cave's works for years. My wife and I played a Bad Seeds song at our wedding. I included him in my book, To Bob and Back, too. So instinctively, I had tried listening to Wild God when it came out, but quickly grew bored. Given its year-end status a few months later, though, I tried again this week. Nope, still bored. Last year, when ChatGPT buzz was all about, someone used the recently liberated AI technology to write a Nick Cave song, then sent the lyrics to Nick. Nick wasn't happy with the results, to say the least. In response, he wrote a very articulate and erudite critique of any suggestion that a computer might one day replace art or the artist in some way. Yet, re-listening to Cave's new album, it occurred to me that it sounded exactly how an AI Nick Cave album just might. In the track Wild God, he even name-checks Jubilee Street, the title of one of his strongest and most popular compositions in the last 20 years. Vocally, he has settled into a low, effortless, gentlemanly mumble, as if a member of a distinguished London social club, which he could well be, the dapper chap, just enough gins deep to lean over and tell you a dirty secret. Gone is the yearning, fragile Cave vocal, excitedly teetering on the perilous ledge of pitch. Gone is the dirty shipyard swagger of the Bad Seeds too. Players have turned over. Time has eroded them like a rock face, leaving bottle-black-haired Nick and bestie fellow score composer Warren Ellis guiding the sound in an electric strings swirl of movie emotions, with a Radiohead member called in for fun. I've never used ChatGPT, partly because it sounds boring and suicidal, but also because it feels kind of scary. I'm used to hearing my own voice recorded in songs or now when making these stories, but I still have a fear akin to listening to your own outgoing voicemail or staring into the mirror too long, about seeing the outside version of myself, of what AI might make of me. Am I really that predictable that a computer could do it? Is everything I write basically the same? Has real life taught me nothing? Every time I sit down to write my wife a birthday or holiday card, I ask myself, what can I say that's new, that feels real and in the moment? I bought plenty of happy birthday cards for people, then upon opening them up, pen in hand, and seeing happy birthday printed inside, thought, well, I guess there's no point writing anything else. With AI has come a lot of genuine fear about how it might impact human jobs, particularly in the arts. But I feel like the fear is deeper than that. Aren't we all also scared of just being that predictable, that unoriginal? Are we really just trudging along, doing the same thing again and again? Perhaps, but as long as you're not trying to sell the results, is there anything wrong with that? Ubiquitous year-end lists feel like a symptom of a world moving much too fast to me, of technologies that tell us all so much about each other in neatly curated shapes and sizes from just the right angle, that real life can start to feel like a real bore, like there's something wrong with listening to your favourite records year after year. We try to root out AI by looking for mistakes, extra fingers on a hand or a misplaced phrase, but mistakes can be beautiful when they are human. We can't let AI erase them too. It feels as if sometimes technology is already doing that to Cave and others' art, whether they know it or not. The artist himself reduced to cranking out convenient, Cave-sounding compositions as smooth as the space orb console of a luxury studio in Provence that rests beside a vineyard and looks more like a $2,000 a night Airbnb than a place of work, all under the watchful eye of co-owner Brad Pitt, no less. No, I won't tell you my year-end list, but I will tell you that from my listening experience this year, my favourite Nick Cave album was a nice new copy of Let Love In I played for the kids one night over dinner. It was originally released in 1994. It still sounds fantastic. Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. Thanks for subscribing if that's what you've done, and liking. And please feel free to comment on any of the posts. I love to hear from people. Share them with your friends. If you like my writing and you want to help, that's probably the best thing you can do, is just share it around. I really appreciate it. Have a great start to the new year. Be back at the end of January with the month stories. Stay well. Holiday colds are out there, trust me. All the music you hear on this podcast is either by my old band Horse Stories or me just noodling around in the office at home. You can get all my old stuff, Horse Stories or Toby Burke, on those darn streamers. All right, enjoy your month. Bye for now.